that don't want what we know out there.
How a person can go from really almost nothing to becoming a millionaire by owning rental properties.
He would always buy these flip houses, and I just remember thinking, this guy is crazy. Why would he buy that house?
In the past decade, there's been a huge surge in the peer-to-peer short-term rental market.
Become an insider. So you have to know the rules before you get the game.
Every second counts. So make every second count.
Welcome to the Real Estate Jam. Whether you're just beginning or the best of the best, we're glad you're here. We will share successes, failures, and strategies for the action-taking real estate investor. And now to your hosts, JD and Melissa.
Hi guys, welcome to the Real Estate Jam podcast. I'm JD with my wonderful co-host.
Hey JD, how are you?
Doing pretty good, excited. It's Monday, so we got the whole week ahead of us.
Right.
Melissa loves Mondays.
Love Mondays.
Well, I'm sure everybody's heard about this lawsuit that NAR was involved in, the National Association of Realtors, how it affects them as investors, how it affects our agents as agents. So we thought we would go straight to the top, and I'm really happy to introduce you guys to Leo Pareja.
Good job.
Leo was a former chief strategy officer for EXP. He's the current, as of I think April, CEO of EXP Realty. He was top producing Keller Williams agent in the world in 2010. He is he's on the leadership side of EXP right now, but he was a producing agent for a lot of years. And
high producing
agent for a lot of years. Leo, we're really excited to have you on the podcast. Thanks for making time for us.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so stressed out about this. I know you're probably sick of talking about it, but you know, the changes. So we just were hoping that you could help us, help our team, our agents, you know, get a better grip of how it's going to go down.
Yeah, no, and that's why I spend so much of my days thinking about it, talking about it, making sure we have all the processes. So I'll, forgetting all the emotions, because there's very big emotions that come with it that I think are very rightfully deserve to be there. But one of the theories that I lived my entire life is, give me the rules of engagement and I'll decide if I want to play the game, right? So I've been in the industry for 2 decades, and I have very strong feelings. I don't think we did anything wrong. I give the scenario that I feel like most of us turned 16, got a driver's license, went on the highway, went 65 miles an hour, and now they're saying we did something wrong, right? We worked within the framework that was available to us. But forgetting my personal feelings around something, when the world shifts, unbeknownst to us, the conversation everyone needs to have with themselves is like, hey, do I still want to participate in this industry? And if the answer is yes, which I hope it is, because I think we do a noble thing and we help families find their place where they raise their family. Statistically speaking, the single largest investment of their life, spend 8 to 9 years in a property. And that's where we raise our families and create memories. So I think what we do is very noble and very important, and it helps contribute to the greatest contributor to net worth in American families. So with that said, the things to understand, I'll give you one sentence to take away as a way to think through it, which is treat your buyers like you treat your sellers, right? All the skill sets and processes we put in place to take a listing, you should mirror that on the buy side. Meaning, you would never take a listing without a signed listing agreement. The concept sounds ludicrous, right? And the reason why, it's because that's how we were taught to do it, right? And the rules require it, which is what's shifting, right? You cannot list a house and stick it in the MLS without a listing agreement, because when you sign up for the MLS, that's one of the rules. You have to have a signed listing agreement with a start date, an expiration date. You have X amount of days to put it in the MLS. You have to put the expiration date. If you're going to extend it, you better have an amendment. You have a sales price. You have a list of things you're willing to do for the compensation you're willing to receive, right? In the 2 decades I've been in the business, there's been a variety of vendors you can use. Some charge a percentage, some charge a flat fee, some charge a menu of fees for limited services. That's all existed on the seller representation side. for as long as you guys are private in real estate. And that's how you should think about the buyer agency shift. You cannot engage with a buyer without a signed buyer representation agreement. You will not be compensated if you don't have one in place. And the fee that you're willing to accept has to be pre-negotiated prior to you showing the first property. So all that, absent of a comparison kind of sounds scary, but that's why I say put your listing hat on, right? Just like you expect to be in a competitive interview process, right? If you've taken a listing in the last 2 decades, you were probably competing with other agents who had either a different model or different strategy to present. You had to come with a very tight presentation. You knew your numbers. You knew your list to sales ratio. You knew your market share in that zip code or neighborhood or town. You knew that, on average, you sold homes in X amount of days for X percentage to list. And so that's the world we're going to move into with buyers. And so there's several things I'm advising agents to do, which is, first of all, learn all the new numbers that you may not be familiar with. So I'm inviting agents to go back and interview 2 years of people they've put in homes, like the last 24 months, and say, hey, what did you love about my services I provided you, right? I would encourage you to learn all of the metrics that you can apply to that. In those last 24 months, let's say you helped 12 families. What percentage of those homes, all those transactions, did you negotiate seller concessions? Be able to say, in the last 2 years, I was able to successfully negotiate an average of X percent seller concessions for my buyers, right? Because the thing is, we all take for granted what we do because it's normal to us. That's a tremendous amount of value you add to a transaction, right? Like the fact that you as an agent know that you could offer 1 month free rent back because the mortgage payment gets skipped, and the buyer did not have to come up with more money specifically, but you were able to give the seller an item of value is part of the negotiation in a multiple offer situation, and not just blanketly go up on price, right? Those are the differences that make you a really good agent representing somebody. So I appreciate and understand where all the fear comes from, so I don't want to minimize it in any way. It's just saying, okay, well, you have a decision to make. Do you want to stay in this industry? The answer is yes. These are the new rules. You cannot work with someone unless you have a signed agreement. You cannot earn more than that signed agreement dictates. So there is no more offer of compensation, a blanket offer of collaboration co-op fee being offered. And a seller can advertise a seller concession credit, but that's no different than today. If you saw a property listed and said, hey, we're offering a $5,000 credit, it has to be put into the contract and it has to be negotiated. So the concept of procuring cause and guaranteed, like take you to arbitration if I'm not paid, was being advertised, is going away. So I'll stop talking there. I said a lot of words, but I'm happy to dig in further if you need clarification on any specific part of what I just said. But I'll pause right there.
So I think that I understand that. And as an investor, I've signed buyer broker agreements before. I've had them presented. I've refused to sign them before. What do you think the education process for these buyers? And I guess we primarily work with investor clients looking for short-term rentals. So it's a little bit easier because they understand, it's been a thing in commercial real estate for a long time, but for just single family rentals, it hasn't really been a thing. But I think with the investors, we can get that conversation is a lot easier to have than either a VA buyer or a first-time home buyer having that conversation where they can barely scrape together enough for a down payment on 3.5%, FHA loan or the VA funding fee. And especially with the VA, they're not even allowed to pay a buyer's agent, according to the VA, which I think there's some changes coming with that. But how do you have that conversation with a clientele that has never had to deal with this before?
Yeah, so that's one thing I say constantly is just appreciate and understand that none of us have gone through this before, right? So in a way, it's a calming statement, meaning that we're all going to go through this together. So there is a whole bunch of wait and see. And again, I have these same conversations when I speak to media or even some of these government agencies you just referenced. So the VA has come out with a temporary solution that they're going to move towards a permanent one. And I actually called the deputy director of the VA right away because I actually know him really well. And they do not want to put, their buyers in a disproportionately disadvantaged way of competing, right? So, I would think through that process of a first-time home buyer who needs every dollar they can get, no different than, let's just say, a buyer who's just got enough for the down payment but needs the seller to pay all the closing costs, right? We've all helped that buyer, but it's like they only have 3.5% down, which does not cover the 3% they need for all the closing costs for the title fees and title insurance policy and all that. So my guess is that if they choose full representation for a fee that's acceptable to the agent, because that's the other thing. It's like commissions are fully negotiable. So what people charge will be what they're willing to render services for, just like in the listing side today, right? If you work with investors, there's a lot of investors or agents that work with investors that probably do it for a reduced fee because that seller is very sophisticated. They're handing you a fully renovated property with great curb appeal, sometimes staging, right? And that's a very sophisticated seller. It's very different than a first-time seller who needs you to help them declutter and do the curb appeal and help you pick. You're picking out cabinets and countertops and refresh, maybe even helping them get 2 or 3 bids from the contractor, managing that process for them, right? So there's level of service differences with everything. So again, a first-time home buyer that requires that, maybe that's part of the understanding from the onset. You're like, hey, if we can't negotiate from the seller, we'll disclose that fully to the potential seller that this is part of the offer and we need it in order to consummate the transaction, right? That's if you are a first-time home buyer and don't have the money for closing costs, you can still buy a house. You just need to find a seller who's willing to pay your closing costs, right? So again, there's full negotiation between the buyer and the buyer's agent, and now there's full negotiation between the buyer contract and the seller, if that makes sense.
Sure, it definitely does. Now, the next immediate problem that I see is on the selling side. When you go to get your listing agreement, you are going to run in, and we run into these kind of sellers right now today that don't want to offer buyer compensation. And as an investor, we list every single property that we redo on the MLS, pay full commissions, and all of the investors that I know understand the value that a good real estate agent brings. But these first-time home sellers, they're going to see, especially with the way the media has portrayed it as, oh, we don't have to pay buyer's agents anymore. How do you have those conversations?
Yeah, so I think the number one thing that an agent needs to do is fully be well-versed in this. And I talk about this a lot on podcasts and interviews just like this one, where look, the agent who has the most information and can educate will attract, right? So I've gotten a ton of inbound calls from builders and investors who are like, I'm fully paying it. Because this is where I fundamentally disagree with the media and even the plaintiff's attorneys that I've always seen. And I'm speaking as an individual seller of real estate, because I don't know if you know my background. I actually owned one of the largest hard money lending companies in the East Coast, and I flipped as a principal over 100 properties. So I've walked a mile in your shoes quite a bit. And I fully believe that the advertised co-op was demand gen lead, marketing. Because I'm asking some stranger to put another stranger in their car for 6 months and unlock the door and present our property over another property. That's marketing dollars, right? So I never saw that as a, forced tax system. To me, it's a form of advertising. And when I was buying and selling renovated homes, it was part of my marketing budget. No different than staging, right? Like to me, a well-priced property with beautiful curb appeal, with great staging, with beautiful photography, and a competitive co-op compared to the market were one of many ingredients in a formula to sell a property fast, right?
Yeah.
So I understand this as a seller and as an agent. And when I was an agent, I used to actually say to my sellers, hey, by the way, I'm also a seller in today's market in this zip code. Go check out my listing on 123 Main Street. I actually own it. And everything I'm asking you to do as a seller, I'm personally doing as a seller side by side. And I'm not treating you or suggesting you to do anything differently than I would do if I was trying to get equity out of a property I own. So why I say that is because capitalism wins every time. So if you've seen any of the other conversations I've done, I can tell you 2 years from now or 3 years from now, people are like, what it'll look like? And I said, it'll be business as usual. And they say, what does that mean? And I said, it means what it means. I actually don't know what it is, but the market will get us there. Meaning, there's now new rules of engagement. Customers are willing to pay for a service. There will be some people that probably undercut everybody. And when you price a service too low, you go out of business.
Yeah.
If you price it too high, you don't get enough business. So there's a happy medium, and I don't know what it is. People ask me all the time, what do you think people will pay? People will pay what they're willing to pay. And we will find equilibrium between supply and demand of services and service, providers. And we will have a new normal. It's getting there, that middle that's going to be very confusing. And I'm calling that the messy middle starting August. So as you pointed out, the media has been quite loud. And so there's going to be home buyers who read a headline, or home sellers who read a headline are going to say, I no longer have to do that. And they're going to try it that way. And they will either get an outcome they're satisfied with, or they won't. And they will look to data to say, okay, this did not work. Maybe I should try that. And what I point to, again, I started the conversation with treat your buyers like you treat your sellers, right? If we look at the seller behavior that we've had for the functional lifetime of I've been selling real estate, which is over 20 years, is people can always do for sale by owner, right? People at a very high rate try it, and 70, 80% of the time end up choosing a professional. Mm-hmm. And what I also love is the surveys of people who use a realtor and then do it without using a realtor. And the ones who successfully consummate a buy side or a sell side without an agent go, I would never do that again. That was a full-time job.
Yeah.
Right. So if you look at the Zillow seller report for last year, they said something like 36% of all sellers attempted to do it themselves. It's actually much higher than I would have expected, but only 11% of that original number consummated the transaction, meaning more than 2/3 said, this is really, really hard.
Right.
And so let me go hire a professional. And if you look at the data, listing a house takes 20 to 30 hours. A buy-side transaction takes 80 to 100 hours. And this is NAR stats. So my guess is there's going to be a portion of the population who are going to say, I can save this money. I'm going to do it myself, or I don't need this representation. They're probably going to try to schedule 10, 15 showings, realize it's a full-time job, or struggle to like the house, then find somebody to write the offer for them. I don't know if that's an attorney or if that's another professional of some sort, or a flat fee, whatever it is. My guess, and again, none of us know the future, is that they're going to try it at the same kind of rates that we see on the seller side. Mm-hmm. And my guess is that it's going to perform very similarly.
Yeah. So I think that established agents who've been in business for a long time, they're pretty good at rolling with the punches. That's why they've been in business for a long time. And we're always having new agents coming into the market, or part-time agents coming into the market. I think those are the agents that are going to be the most adversely affected by this, because they don't have the established book of business and referrals, and they're starting from scratch. What recommendations would you bring to somebody who maybe, gets their real estate agent license in, I don't know, July, and has to figure out how to make a go of this with the new law of the land?
So the interesting thing is the new folks won't know.
Yeah.
And again, go back to the seller side. If you're brand new to real estate, we tell you how to take a listing. You have to have a presentation. You have to have a signed listing agreement, and it has to have an expiration date and right. That's how you take a listing.
Yeah.
I would venture to argue that post rule changes, if somebody just passes the test in February, I'm talking like 5-6 months removed from because what I have been saying to people is like, I bet you, and remember this, and it's recorded, like sometime in September, there is going to be a massive freak out at more than one closing table where the buyer's agent made zero and didn't even realize it because it was after or before the date and they were in a hurry and they didn't realize that this one offered one and that one didn't, right? There's going to be like a super painful transition period. But let's fast forward to like next spring. You pass your test next spring. You don't actually know that there was a different way of doing it. So that's part of the population answer. And the answer I've said to everyone for 2 decades, and this is what I did, I always suggested to a brand new person to join a team, even like 6, 12, 18, 24 months, purely for the amount of stuff you can touch, right? Meaning if you're on a team, you can shadow, you could potentially write 3, 4, 5, 2 offers a month. Like you could have touched so many more transactions in a super compressed period of time that gives you a great education. And again, absent of my current title or and like, that's always what I've said. And it's been recorded for 2 decades that I give that advice.
Yeah, that's really, we try to give that advice too, that you don't need to stay forever, but just as a starting point to help you kickstart it. I think it's really great.
I would actually tell anybody running a team and someone joining a team, it's absolutely not forever. Like the goal is for you to actually self-actualize. And like, there's a lot of people on teams who say, I had many people who joined my team once upon a time say, hey, I want to be you one day. So like, I'm here for as long as I need to be here to learn everything I can from you, but don't get offended. Again, I think everything rises and falls with clear communication and proper expectations. Like if you fully disclosed, like why would somebody do, and I've seen team leaders get really hurt emotionally. Like, I can't believe they would do that after all I did for them. That's kind of the beauty of our model, right? Like if you pour into these people and then they go and self-actualize and create their own team and they're in your rev share group, like that's a solid return on your investment. Of time, energy, and money, because leads cost money, right? Training costs money. Your time has a value to it. So that's my very honest opinion.
Sure. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Do you think that this changes the way that established agents or established teams should be marketing for leads? When we're going to qualify buyers, do we need to take an extra step in qualifying that buyer to make sure that they have the means to pay us if they aren't offered some sort of concession from the seller?
So just for devil's advocate, how does that differ today than you validating that they actually qualify for the mortgage, right? So like, I never personally said, I don't believe you, show me your bank statement with a down payment, right? Like that never actually was part of my script. So like, there's got to be a certain level of inherent trust, right? Like if you sit down with someone and say, this is a legally binding agreement, this fee is owed, there are a couple of ways that this will be paid. We can ask the seller to pay all of it. The seller may or may not agree. They could agree to pay half of it, a third of it, a fourth of it, 100% of it. And any delta in between, you're legally responsible. By the way, that's what every buyer agreement today says. Pre-settlement. That's what they say. So for the most part, the MLS co-op covers it. And I was a broker owner for a long time. Like a lot of those agreements said 3%. And if it was offered 2.5%, I rarely saw an agent enforce the delta.
Yeah.
So all that, like, we also don't forget the world we currently live in, right? I feel a lot of people read the letter of the law and said, this is drastically different. Like, how's that different than how you operate today, right? So the difference is there is no co-op offered. So that delta is a conversation between you and the consumer, right? Before it was like, let's say I agreed to X and they offered Y, I just took Y. Now we're saying my service is worth Y. I can ask for X. They don't have to pay any of it and you still owe me Y. That's the big distinction, which, by the way, pre-settlement, if there was an offer of 0, you would still have to make the business decision if you're willing to work for 0, or if you were going to get them to pay you a fee that's acceptable to you for your services rendered.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess the next question I have is, we've had people ask about, well, can the agent accept their fee on terms? Can their agreement, if their buyer broker agreement says 3% and the seller's only offering 1%, can they take that 2% over time, or have it financed, or any of that other kind of creative way to make a commission?
Yeah, so have it financed at settlement disbursement would still behave like a full fee. So I don't think that one's relevant. No one's asked me the over time. As the broker accepting the fee, that gets really tricky because you have to disperse and call that a closed transaction. So, no one's asked that, and that would be an operational question that you would have to answer. But again, not having the information, there's a lot of stuff that affects that. Like, you're not closing and dispersing an escrow, right? Like, there's just super tactical stuff that
Sure.
doesn't feel like it's easy to do. And frankly, if anyone's financing any part of the transaction, well, again, we could make the argument that the lender wouldn't approve that, right?
Yeah.
Like, you can't have anything off escrow or off HUD, right? These are just practical lending requirements. So again, my humble opinion, not as the CEO of EXP, just as someone in real estate for 2 decades, is there's a lot of things we're probably overthinking. And there's probably some stuff we're not thinking about.
Yeah.
And we're not going to know until it's in practice, right? There's the amount of times I've said, hey, this sounds like a great idea. And then we turn it on like, oh, that's a really good point that we'd never considered that, kind of unintended consequence that comes with a new idea. But again, the gentle reminder and what should be a calming statement is that nobody knows what you're doing. Like, this is new to all of us. And I will also remind you guys that not every state is the same, right? There is different real estate laws in each state that govern with different degrees of severity if a rule is broken or is not broken. Like, there are different parts of a state that have different customs, right? In some parts of a state, the seller picked the escrow company. In the southern part of the state, the buyer picks the escrow. Like, there is like, in real estate, it's either enforceable or not enforceable, and very few things are actually illegal per se. It's like, okay, what is the enforceability of this written document?
Yeah, that's great. Do you have any other?
No, that was a lot of great information for sure.
Yeah. So if people listening to the podcast wanted to find more about you, more about EXP, where can we send them to get more information about what you guys are doing up there?
So me personally, Instagram, Facebook are great ways, and it's just my name, Leo, Leo, last name Pareja, Pareja. If you go to our YouTube page, if you go to YouTube and put in EXP Realty, I actually have hours of me talking about this till I get blue in the face. So like, I have at least 2 1-hour talks that were very tactical and very detailed with language and what the laws are affected and who is covered. But if you just put my name into YouTube as well, I do a lot of these with different folks from all parts of different countries. So I promise I don't say the same things over and over again.
Awesome. And before we get out of here, what's your number one piece of advice for brand new agents besides joining a team?
So it's how you pick that team, right? And so this is the same advice I've been given for 2 decades. Real estate is a beautiful business. I made a Facebook post today where I celebrated our top number 1 agent in Canada and our number 1 agent in the US, both phenomenal team leaders. But the cool thing is, like, everyone has their day one, right? And so it doesn't matter if you just pass the test. If this is a business that you're going after, the potential return on investment to capital invested is probably the greatest opportunity I know of in America. I've built and scaled 2 very large companies that required a ton of startup capital and a lot of technology being built with lots of employees. In most states, you can get your license for under $1,000 and go grind and provide for your family, which is a phenomenal opportunity in this country. But what I advise to people is if there is somebody in your market that you want to become, I would really survey who they are, not only as a business person, but as a human being, as an individual. And then I'd offer to go work for them, right? Because it's not just joining a team and touching a lot of transactions. I would like, do you want to do investor focused stuff? Do you want to high end? Do you want to do middle price points, right? Do you do high price, low units, or do you do low price, high units, right? Do you do full service, limited service? There's so many ways to make a living in this business that really I invite people to have a very honest conversation with themselves about how they're wired, where their God-given talents lie, and then find someone to learn from that matches that. Because the amount of people that like will listen to a podcast and see someone who's phenomenal at prospecting, and they say, you got to do 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day of calls, like that would give me anxiety. Like I do not like that. That is not how I'm wired. But there's other things like I can get on stage in front of 6,000 people without a script and deliver for 30 minutes. And that is probably ranked right next to dying as the second highest fear of all for
sure.
a good portion of humans. So figure out how you're wired, what makes you happy, and go do that.
Awesome.
Good word.
Yeah. Leo, thank you so much for finding time for us today. We really appreciate you coming on the show.
Awesome.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Jam. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more information, check out our website, therealestatejam.com, or find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at The Real Estate Jam. If you have any questions, feel free to drop us an email at therealestatejam@gmail.com. See you next episode.